Let's begin with 5 names. Spain, the reigning world champions who just lifted football's biggest trophy. France, England, Germany, Italy. 5 of the wealthiest and most successful football nations on earth. And now every one of them has delivered the exact same message to FIFA. We're not playing in the 2030 World Cup. This isn't a warning. It isn't a bargaining tactic. It's an official decision. And here's the part that should have Gianni Infantino seriously worried. Those 5 countries are only the beginning. They're just 5 out of UEFA's 55 members, because this isn't a handful of nations walking away from the World Cup. According to the story, it's the whole of Europe. Every UEFA member reportedly standing together with one unanimous vote. So what could FIFA possibly have proposed to push the strongest football confederation on the planet this far? The answer is even more controversial than it first sounds. Earlier this week, Infantino reportedly unveiled a formal proposal. No rumors, no leaks, an official plan. FIFA wants to move the commercial rights of the World Cup and its other major tournaments into a brand new company called FIFA Forward Enterprise, then sell a 20% stake in that company to private investors in a deal reportedly valued at around $20 billion. Think about that for a second. FIFA would essentially be selling part of the World Cup to private capital. And the story becomes even more controversial because the investment group expected to lead the deal is reportedly connected to Joshua Kushner, the founder of Thrive Capital. If that surname sounds familiar, there's a reason. Joshua Kushner is the brother of Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of the President of the United States. So the proposal, at least according to its critics, would leave part of the world's biggest sporting event, built over generations by players, fans, and nations across the globe, linked to a private investment fund with connections to the White House. You can already imagine why that has sparked such a huge reaction. FIFA, of course, isn't presenting it as a sell-off. Infantino reportedly described it as an opportunity. Approve the proposal, he told all 211 member associations, and the financial rewards would begin almost immediately. FIFA claims every federation could receive more than $80 million over the next decade, providing a massive boost for smaller football nations while offering guaranteed funding for everyone involved. And there was another detail that caught people's attention. The deadline. Member associations were reportedly given until September 19th, just over 6 weeks, to decide whether to approve a plan that could permanently reshape ownership of the World Cup's commercial future. Critics say the biggest issue wasn't even the money. It wasn't the Kushner connection either. It was the process. According to reports, FIFA announced the proposal before properly consulting the confederations, leaving them with what many viewed as a decision that had already been made. That's where UEFA responded. On Thursday, European football reportedly held an emergency virtual meeting involving all 55 member associations. Sources claim more than 50 representatives spoke during the discussions, and by the end of the meeting the vote was said to be completely unanimous. Their reported position was clear. Boycott not only the 2030 World Cup but every FIFA competition while this proposal remains on the table. And they didn't stop there. UEFA is also said to be demanding a legal guarantee that FIFA will never allow private investors to take ownership or control over its tournaments in the future. The World Cup cannot be treated like an investment product, UEFA reportedly declared. And with that single sentence, the entire conflict can be summed up. For Infantino, the World Cup appears to be an asset, a product with enormous financial value, something that can be packaged, divided, and even partially sold. But for the players, the supporters, and everyone who has grown up loving this tournament, it has never been something you can put a price on. And now some of football's most influential voices are reminding FIFA who they believe the World Cup truly belongs to. Just think about what a boycott like this would actually mean. It wouldn't simply be a symbolic protest. Remove Spain, France, England, Germany, Italy, Portugal, the Netherlands, Croatia, and dozens of other European nations, and what remains is no longer the World Cup people know. It becomes a watered-down version carrying the same famous name but lacking the competition that made it legendary. The very tournament Infantino reportedly hopes investors will value at billions could instantly lose much of its appeal if Europe refuses to participate. In other words, investors would be buying into a competition where many of football's biggest nations simply aren't there. And the consequences wouldn't wait until 2030 either. They would begin much sooner. FIFA's next major events aren't even in the men's game. The Women's World Cup arrives in Brazil in 2027, while youth competitions and qualification tournaments come even earlier. If Europe's first boycott starts with those events, then the first people affected would be women footballers and teenage players who had absolutely nothing to do with this dispute. Critics already have a phrase for that. They argue that women's football should never become a bargaining chip in a political battle, because nobody comes out looking good. Then the pressure grew even stronger. This was no longer just Europe making noise, regardless of how FIFA's supporters describe it. CONCACAF, representing North America, Central America, and the Caribbean with 41 member associations, including current World Cup hosts the United States, Canada, and Mexico, also held an emergency meeting and rejected the proposal outright. While they stopped short of supporting a boycott, they strongly criticized the process itself, pointing to the lack of consultation, the extremely short deadline, and what they described as an absence of proper governance. The U.S. Soccer Federation publicly supported that position. Soon after, Asia entered the conversation as well. The AFC, representing 47 member associations and traditionally viewed as one of Infantino's strongest allies, released its own statement expressing solidarity with UEFA and CONCACAF while demanding an urgent review of FIFA's decision-making process. Add the numbers together. 55 UEFA members, 41 from CONCACAF, and 47 from Asia. That's 143 of FIFA's 211 member associations standing against the proposal. Infantino would need majority support for the plan to move forward. Looking purely at the numbers, many observers believe the proposal is now hanging by a thread. Then another surprise followed. Carlos Cordero, one of Infantino's closest advisors and FIFA's representative on the White House Committee for the 2026 World Cup, resigned from his position and urged other senior officials to speak publicly. Almost overnight, conversations began about something that seemed impossible only days earlier: a serious challenger emerging against Infantino in the next FIFA presidential election, a race many believed had already been decided. And if this entire situation feels strangely familiar, there's a reason. It echoes the same Infantino who proposed holding the World Cup every 2 years back in 2021, a plan that Europe also threatened to block through a boycott. It's the same president who expanded the Men's World Cup to 48 teams, while reports continue to circulate about a possible expansion to 60 teams by 2030. Critics argue there's a consistent pattern. A bold announcement arrives from the top while confederations, federations, players, and supporters discover the details at exactly the same time as everyone else. Now, before picking a side, let's slow down for a moment and look at FIFA's argument as well. A channel that only shouts without considering both perspectives isn't very useful. To be fair, FIFA's reasoning isn't entirely without merit. The organization insists that any money raised from the proposal would go straight back into football, helping smaller and less wealthy federations that don't have the financial power of Europe's biggest leagues. The countries without a Premier League, La Liga, or other billion-dollar competitions. Infantino described the idea as exactly that: an offer, not an order. FIFA has firmly rejected claims that it is selling football itself. And, realistically speaking, private investment in sports is hardly a new concept. Around the world, private funding has already transformed clubs, leagues, and competitions, with plenty of projects benefiting from that investment. You could even argue that some of the outrage comes at a convenient moment, because the richest football nations, the ones that already control much of the sport's wealth, aren't always the first to defend smaller associations when their own influence isn't being challenged. That's a criticism worth considering as well. The honest reality is that there's a genuine debate about how football should finance its future and how its wealth should be distributed more fairly. That conversation is perfectly reasonable. But according to critics, that's not what caused this crisis. What turned everything upside down was the timing. FIFA had just come off the most profitable World Cup in its history, with record financial reserves already in place. Yet despite that, the organization was reportedly looking to sell part of the commercial future of its biggest competition. What truly ignited the backlash wasn't only the proposal itself. It was the speed. A reported $20 billion plan pushed with only 6 weeks before the deadline, involving an investment fund linked to the family of the U.S. president, all before meaningful consultation with the confederations had taken place. For many people, the issue wasn't simply what FIFA wanted to do. It was the way it tried to do it. Too quickly, too quietly, and, according to critics, without bringing football's biggest stakeholders into the discussion first. That's why this controversy has become much bigger than a business deal. Because for millions of supporters, the World Cup doesn't belong to Gianni Infantino. It doesn't belong to FIFA headquarters. And it certainly doesn't belong to a private investment fund. It belongs to the supporters filling stadiums, to the underdog nations fighting through qualification, and to the players who spend their entire careers chasing the chance to lift that trophy. FIFA's role has always been to protect the competition. Critics argue that this week, it looked like the organization was trying to sell part of it instead. Their expectation may have been that all 211 member associations would quietly approve the proposal. Instead, more than 140 reportedly lined up against it. Senior advisors have already stepped away, opposition is growing louder, and many observers believe the proposal could be finished before members even cast their final votes. Whether Infantino chooses to withdraw the plan, continue fighting for it, or face the political consequences, one thing is certain, this story is far from over. So now I want to hear from you. Was this a genuine attempt to secure football's financial future that FIFA failed to explain properly? Or was it one of the biggest political mistakes the sport has ever seen? Share your opinion in the comments below. I'll be reading them all. And if you want to follow everything that happens before the September deadline, make sure you stay with us, because this story is only getting started.